$900 billion a year. 800 bases outside our borders. 10 supercarriers, nobody else has even one. That kind of dominance wasn't destiny. It started with a bunch of cold, broke farmers in 1775, daring to take on the greatest empire on Earth. 4 centuries of almost non-stop fighting turned that scrappy militia into the deadliest toolbox the planet has ever seen. Here's how it happened. Jamestown settlers learned fast. Powhatan arrows punch right through pious intentions. Every colony kept its own Sunday posse, farmers drilling with muskets older than their parents. By 1775, the Continental Congress had to invent an army from scratch. George Washington got 28,000 guys with no uniforms, no cash, and no 2 guns alike. Against them, the Royal Navy and 30,000 redcoats. Somehow, the rebels lasted 8 years, mostly by losing strategically and surviving tactically, until Yorktown finally tipped the scale. Independence bought a breather, not peace. The War of 1812 showed the country could have its capital torched, fight back, and still stand taller. Each clash nudged Army and Navy professionalism up a notch. Westward expansion meant endless small wars. Seminoles in Florida, Mexicans along the Rio Grande, skirmishes across the plains too numerous to name. The Mexican-American War of 1846 handed Washington, California, Texas, the Southwest, and a live fire school for officers who'd later tear the nation apart. Tactics sharpened, technology lagged. Then came the Civil War, 4 million men mobilized, railroads hauled whole divisions overnight, telegraphs zipped orders at the speed of electricity, repeating rifles, ironclads, mass-produced artillery, first time anyone had seen them. Conscription became law on both sides. By 1865, the Army had figured out how to feed and arm a city-sized force and how to bury 600,000 men without breaking the Republic. For 30 years after Appomattox, the military shrank to frontier constabulary size. Then the Spanish-American War kicked the door open in 1898. 4 months of fighting snagged Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, and a Pacific empire begging for a navy. Steel battleships replaced wooden frigates, coaling stations circled the planet. Suddenly, the United States owned overseas bases and a 2-ocean fleet, something no Western Hemisphere power had ever pulled off. World War I showed how fast a modern nation can burn through men and metal. Draft boards shoved 4 million Americans across the Atlantic. Factories cranked out more rifles in a year than the Union Army ever carried. But, you know, the real makeover came after 1941. Pearl Harbor flipped a reluctant democracy into a full-throttle arsenal. In just 4 years, the Army exploded from 190,000 to 8 million, the Navy from 500 ships to 6,000, and the Air Force from a handful of biplanes to 300,000 aircraft. The Manhattan Project dropped the ultimate mic. When Japan surrendered, the United States stood alone. Factories untouched, cities unbombed, and the bomb in its pocket. Victory didn't spell demobilization, it spelled containment. The Soviet Union and the bomb meant the United States kept a big military in peacetime for the first time ever. NATO, the CIA, and the Department of Defense popped up in a 5-year brainstorm. Korea and Vietnam stress-tested the new gear. Helicopters, jets, body armor, napalm. Defense spending parked between 4 and 10% of GDP and honestly never slid back to pre-war levels. Entire companies, Boeing, Lockheed, Raytheon, were born on Pentagon contracts. By 1989, 5 million Americans wore uniforms and the fleet could park off any coastline on Earth. The Soviet collapse left Washington policing a planet with no rival. Desert Storm flaunted smart bombs and stealth fighters on live TV. Kosovo proved air power alone could win. Then 9/11 flipped the script again. Afghanistan and Iraq shifted the target from nation-states to terror cells, drones, and cyber weapons. The budget doubled. Again. Special Operations Command ballooned from 23,000 to 70,000 while bases crept into Africa and Central Asia in numbers still classified. Today the Space Force tends satellites, the Navy sails unmanned drone ships, and artificial intelligence picks bombing targets. The cycle, well, it keeps spinning. From Lexington to Kabul, every fight added a layer new tricks, thicker wallets, longer reach. The colonial farmer with a rusty musket became a drone pilot in Nevada. The question isn't how the United States got this strong, it's whether any democracy can stay this armed and still remain a democracy. The next 400 years start now. If today's story rang true, hit subscribe and tell us which slice of history we ought to unpack next.